Part 1, The Iron Wall. Mia Campbell walked down the long, polished hallway of Griffin and Partners, her heels clicking with each step, the sound echoing like a metronome that synchronized her thoughts. She was a woman of precision and purpose, and she wore that reputation like armor. Everything about her reflected the life she had built, the perfectly tailored suit, the sleek, jet-black hair pulled into an immaculate bun, and the sharp, deliberate stride of someone who had earned her place in a world dominated by men. Mia was a lawyer, one of the best in New York. At 32, she had already made partner at one of the most prestigious law firms in the city. Her office overlooked the skyline, a panorama of power and ambition that served as a constant reminder of what she had sacrificed to get there. She was proud, unapologetically so, and she had learned early on that love, messy, emotional, and unpredictable, was a weakness she couldn't afford. Griffin and Partners was her sanctuary, her battleground. The courtroom was where she thrived, where she transformed from Mia Campbell, the woman, into Mia Campbell, the unstoppable force. In her world, there were no feelings, only facts. No emotions, only outcomes. And she liked it that way. But today was different. As Mia stepped into the conference room for the first meeting of the day, she immediately felt a shift in the air. She scanned the room, her dark eyes sweeping over the faces of the firm's senior partners before they settled on a man she didn't recognize. He was seated at the far end of the table, dressed in a charcoal gray suit that somehow managed to look both perfectly professional and casually disheveled. His hair was tousled, as if he had just run his hands through it, and there was a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Mia, good to see you," one of the senior partners said, standing up as she entered. "We've got an exciting case on our hands, and I wanted to introduce you to your opposing counsel. This is Andrew Cole. He'll be representing the other side in the Hartley case." Mia's eyes narrowed ever so slightly as she studied Andrew. She had heard of him, of course. Andrew Cole was well known in legal circles, famous for his unorthodox approach and his charm in the courtroom. He was often described as a maverick, someone who didn't follow the rules, someone who played with fire. She had never faced him in court, but she had no illusions about the challenge ahead. Andrew stood and extended his hand. "Nice to finally meet you, Mia. I've heard great things." Mia took his hand, her grip firm, her eyes locked on his. "Likewise," she said, her voice cool and professional, giving nothing away. The handshake lasted a second longer than it should have, and Mia felt a strange jolt of awareness. She pulled her hand back quickly, mentally brushing it off as nothing more than professional tension. She was not here to be charmed. She was here to win. The Hartley case was a high-profile contract dispute between two tech giants, and it promised to be one of the most challenging cases of Mia's career. The stakes were high, millions of dollars hung in the balance, and both sides were prepared to fight tooth and nail. Mia had been working around the clock for weeks, poring over documents, preparing arguments, and strategizing with her team. But every time she walked into the courtroom and saw Andrew sitting at the opposing table, she felt a flicker of something she couldn't quite name. It wasn't attraction, exactly, though there was no denying that Andrew was handsome in a rugged, devil-may-care sort of way. It was something deeper, something more unsettling. He was always so calm, so relaxed, as if he knew something she didn't. Andrew's approach to the case was the complete opposite of Mia's. While she was methodical and meticulous, he was bold and unpredictable. He took risks that she would never dream of taking, often turning the most mundane legal arguments into something compelling and memorable. And, infuriatingly, it worked. One afternoon, during a particularly tense cross-examination, Mia found herself watching Andrew as he questioned a witness. He moved with an easy confidence, his voice smooth and reassuring, but there was an undercurrent of sharpness to his questions that kept everyone on edge. The witness fumbled, clearly thrown off balance, and Mia felt a surge of frustration. Andrew had a way of making things look effortless, and it made her feel as though she was the only one in the room who had to fight for every inch. After court adjourned for the day, Mia headed to a nearby cafe to go over her notes. She had just settled into a corner booth with her laptop when she heard a familiar voice. "Mind if I join you?" Mia looked up to see Andrew standing by her table, holding a cup of coffee. She considered saying no. After all, she didn't need any distractions, but something in his expression made her pause. It wasn't the cocky, self-assured smirk she was used to seeing. He looked almost curious. She sighed and gestured to the seat across from her. "Fine. But I'm not sharing my notes." Andrew chuckled as he slid into the booth. "I wouldn't dream of it." For a few moments, they sat in silence, the sounds of the busy cafe filling the space between them. Mia kept her eyes on her laptop, but she could feel Andrew's gaze on her, studying her in that same infuriatingly calm way he always did. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. "What?" she snapped, looking up from her screen. Andrew smiled, clearly unfazed by her irritation. "Nothing. I'm just trying to figure you out." Mia raised an eyebrow. "What's there to figure out?" "I'm a lawyer. I do my job, and I do it well." "I know that," Andrew said, leaning back in his seat. "But that's not what I mean. You're always so controlled. So guarded. I'm curious what's behind the armor." Mia stiffened, her defenses immediately going up. She had spent years building that armor, carefully crafting a persona that kept people at arm's length. It was how she had survived in a world that wasn't always kind to ambitious women. She wasn't about to let some smooth-talking lawyer strip that away. "I don't need to explain myself to you," she said coldly. Andrew's expression softened, and for a moment, Mia saw something in his eyes that took her by surprise. It wasn't judgment or mockery. It was understanding. "I'm not asking you to," he said quietly. "I'm just saying that maybe you don't have to be so guarded all the time." Mia felt a strange tightening in her chest, a mix of anger and something else, something she didn't want to examine too closely. She looked away, focusing on the screen of her laptop. "You don't know anything about me," she said, her voice hard. Andrew didn't reply right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was gentle. "You're right. I don't. But I'd like to." Mia's heart skipped a beat. She didn't know how to respond to that. She wasn't used to people getting under her skin like this, especially not someone like Andrew. He was supposed to be her opponent, her rival. And yet, there was something about him that drew her in, something that made her want to let down her guard, even if just for a moment. But she couldn't. She wouldn't. "Look," she said, her tone brisk and professional. "We're on opposite sides of this case. That's all this is. Nothing more." Andrew held her gaze for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Fair enough. But just so you know, I don't see you as an opponent, Mia. I see you as an equal." With that, he stood up and walked away, leaving Mia sitting alone in the booth, her heart racing and her mind spinning. As the Hartley case dragged on, Mia found herself increasingly distracted by Andrew. She hated to admit it, but there was something about him that she couldn't shake. He wasn't like the other lawyers she had gone up against. He didn't try to intimidate her or belittle her. He treated her with respect, but more than that, he treated her as an equal. And it terrified her. Mia had spent so long building walls around herself, convinced that love was a distraction she couldn't afford. She had watched too many of her female colleagues lose focus because they got involved with the wrong person, and she had vowed never to let that happen to her. But now, for the first time in her life, she was starting to wonder if maybe, just maybe, there was more to life than winning cases and climbing the corporate ladder. One evening, after a particularly grueling day in court, Mia found herself alone in her office, staring out at the city lights. She had always loved this view, the skyline glittering in the darkness, a symbol of power and success. But tonight, it felt hollow. She had won another round in court, but instead of feeling victorious, she felt empty. Her phone buzzed on her desk, and she glanced at the screen to see a message from Andrew. "Drinks at the Oak Room tonight? No business talk. Just a friendly drink." Mia hesitated. Her first instinct was to say no. She didn't do friendly drinks. She didn't do anything that could blur the lines between her personal and professional life. But then she thought about the conversation they had had in the cafe. The way Andrew had looked at her, not with judgment, but with understanding. Before she could overthink it, Mia typed out a reply. "Okay. See you there at 8. Part 2, A Step into the Unknown. The Oak Room was a swanky bar tucked inside one of the city's oldest hotels. It had an old-world charm, mahogany walls, plush leather chairs, and dim lighting that seemed to promise secrets would be safe there. Mia entered with her usual confidence, though her heart pounded more than she cared to admit. She wasn't used to this, meeting outside of work, blurring professional lines, letting someone like Andrew get close. She spotted him immediately, sitting at the bar with a whiskey in hand. He looked different outside of the courtroom, more relaxed, less the cocky maverick lawyer and more human. His tie was loosened, his jacket draped over the back of the chair, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked tired. Not just from the case, but from something deeper, something that mirrored the way Mia often felt late at night when the rush of success had faded. Andrew turned and saw her, a smile lighting up his face as he waved her over. "You came. I wasn't sure if you would." Mia shrugged, sliding onto the bar stool next to him. "I figured a drink might be nice after the week we've had." He raised his glass. "I'll drink to that." They clinked glasses, and for a few moments, neither of them spoke. It wasn't an awkward silence, though. It felt like both of them were sizing up this moment, understanding that there was something happening between them, something unspoken yet undeniable. Mia took a sip of her drink and leaned back, watching Andrew. "So, no business talk?" Andrew smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "That's the rule. Just two people having a drink." "Two lawyers having a drink," Mia corrected, smirking. Andrew laughed. "Okay, fine. But seriously, I wanted to get to know you outside of the courtroom. We're always in this battle mode, and I feel like I'm missing something important." Mia tilted her head, intrigued. "Like what?" Andrew paused, considering his words. "I don't know. I guess I just want to know the real Mia, not the one who's always ready to cross-examine me into the ground." Mia felt a flicker of discomfort at his words. The real Mia? She wasn't sure there even was a real Mia anymore. She had spent so long perfecting her professional persona that she wasn't sure what was left underneath. But the way Andrew looked at her, curious, kind, with no agenda other than to understand her, it made her want to let down her guard, even if just for a little while. "I'm not sure I know who that is," she said quietly, surprising herself with her honesty. Andrew's smile softened. "I think you do. You just haven't let her out in a while." Mia glanced away, feeling exposed. This was why she didn't do this, why she didn't get close to people. They saw things she wasn't ready to confront, things she didn't want to acknowledge about herself. But then again, maybe that was exactly what she needed. "So, what about you?" she asked, shifting the focus away from herself. "You're always so laid back, like nothing ever gets to you. What's your secret?" Andrew chuckled, swirling his drink. "There's no secret. I just learned a long time ago that life's too short to be afraid of making mistakes. I take risks because I'd rather fail spectacularly than live a life of what-ifs." Mia thought about that for a moment. She had spent her whole life avoiding mistakes, avoiding risks, because she couldn't bear the thought of failing. But what if Andrew was right? What if living with caution meant missing out on something bigger, something more meaningful? "You're not afraid of anything, are you?" she asked, half teasing, half serious. Andrew's smile faded slightly, and for the first time, Mia saw a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. "I'm afraid of plenty of things," he admitted. "But I've learned to push through it." "What about you? What scares you?" Mia's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't used to being asked such direct questions, questions that cut through her defenses and forced her to confront things she preferred to keep hidden. "Failure?" she said after a long pause. "I'm afraid of failing. Of not being enough." Andrew nodded, as if he understood exactly what she meant. "That's a tough one. But here's the thing, what if you're already enough, just as you are?" Mia blinked, the words hitting her harder than she expected. She had spent so long chasing success, proving her worth, that the idea of being enough, without the accolades, without the wins, seemed foreign to her. But as she looked at Andrew, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, he was right. Part 3: Crossing Lines. The next few weeks were a blur of long hours in court and late nights prepping for the Hartley case. But something had shifted between Mia and Andrew. Their interactions, once laced with sharp competitiveness, were now tinged with a strange sense of camaraderie. They were still opponents, still fighting tooth and nail for their respective clients, but there was an unspoken understanding between them, an acknowledgement that they were equals, not just in skill, but in the way they saw the world. They continued to meet outside of work, always with the same agreement: no business talk. They kept their conversations light, discussing books, movies, music, anything but the case. It was a delicate balance, one they both knew could tip into dangerous territory at any moment. But neither of them seemed willing to stop. One evening, after a particularly grueling day in court, Mia found herself in Andrew's apartment. It had happened so naturally. He had suggested ordering takeout instead of going to a restaurant, and before she knew it, they were sitting on his couch, eating Thai food and talking about everything but work. "This is nice," Andrew said, leaning back against the couch cushions. "No pressure, no courtroom drama. Just this." Mia nodded, though she couldn't ignore the subtle tension that had been building between them over the past few weeks. They were dancing around something, and she wasn't sure how much longer they could keep it up. As if sensing her thoughts, Andrew turned to her, his expression serious. "Mia, I know we said no business talk, but there's something I need to say." Mia's heart raced. She didn't like where this was going. "What is it?" Andrew hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I don't want to play games with you. I don't want to pretend that there's nothing going on between us." Mia's pulse quickened. She had known this moment was coming, but she wasn't ready for it. She wasn't ready to confront what was happening between them, because once she did, there would be no going back. "Andrew, we're on opposite sides," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "We can't, we shouldn't." Andrew's eyes softened. "I know. But that doesn't change how I feel." Mia looked away, struggling to keep her emotions in check. She had spent so long keeping her personal life and her professional life separate, so long avoiding anything that could distract her from her goals. But now, for the first time in her life, she wanted to let someone in. She wanted to see where this could go, even if it meant risking everything. "I can't do this," she said quietly, though her heart ached at the words. "I've worked too hard to get where I am. I can't let myself get distracted." Andrew didn't argue. He didn't push. He simply nodded, a look of quiet understanding in his eyes. "I get it, Mia. I really do. But just know that I'm here if you ever change your mind." Mia stood up, her chest tight with emotion. She needed to leave before she said something she couldn't take back. "I should go." Andrew didn't stop her. He simply watched as she gathered her things and headed for the door. As Mia walked down the street, the cool night air stinging her skin, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just made a mistake. A part of her wanted to turn back, to knock on Andrew's door and tell him that she was willing to take the risk. But another part of her, the part that had always kept her safe, always kept her in control, held her back. She didn't know what to do. Part 4: The Breaking Point. The tension between Mia and Andrew only grew as the Hartley case neared its conclusion. In court, they remained professional, but beneath the surface, emotions simmered. Every look, every exchange of words felt charged with something unspoken. It was as if they were teetering on the edge of something that neither of them could fully control. Then, one afternoon, everything came to a head. The cross-examinations were heated, the courtroom buzzing with the energy of two giants locking horns. Mia and Andrew went back and forth, their arguments sharp, their strategies brilliant. But even as they battled it out in front of the judge, Mia could feel the tension building. It was like a storm gathering, waiting to break. When the court adjourned for the day, Mia barely made it back to her office before the weight of everything hit her. She closed the door behind her, leaned against it, and let out a shaky breath. She had never felt like this before, torn between her professional life and her personal feelings, unable to reconcile the two. Her phone buzzed, and she glanced at the screen to see a message from Andrew. "Can we talk?" "I think we need to." Mia stared at the message, her heart pounding. She knew what he wanted to talk about, and she knew that once they had this conversation, there would be no turning back. After a long pause, she typed out a reply. "Okay. My office. Now." Part 5: The Moment of Truth. The moments leading up to Andrew's arrival at Mia's office felt like an eternity. Mia paced back and forth, her mind racing. She was about to step into uncharted territory, and no matter how much she tried to keep her composure, her carefully constructed world felt like it was on the brink of collapse. When Andrew finally knocked on her office door, Mia froze for a split second. She took a deep breath, trying to regain control, and opened the door. Andrew stepped inside, his expression tense but calm, the same calm that had always frustrated her, the calm that now seemed to disarm her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence in the room was thick with everything they hadn't said to each other over the past few weeks. "We can't keep doing this," Andrew said, his voice low. "Pretending like nothing's happening between us. I know you feel it too." Mia looked down, feeling the weight of his words pressing on her. She had spent her entire career mastering the art of control, controlling her emotions, her image, and every situation she found herself in. But Andrew had been different from the start. He had pushed past her walls in a way no one else had, and now, she was standing at a crossroads. "I do feel it," Mia admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But it doesn't change the fact that we're on opposite sides of this case. I can't let my feelings for you interfere with my work." Andrew stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. "I don't want to interfere with your work, Mia. I respect you too much for that. But I'm not going to pretend that this doesn't matter. You matter." Mia's heart skipped a beat. She had never been someone who believed in grand declarations of love or sweeping romantic gestures. But there was something in Andrew's words, in the way he said them, that made her want to believe. For a long moment, they stood there, inches apart, the tension between them almost unbearable. Mia could feel her pulse quickening, could feel the walls she had built around herself beginning to crack. She wanted to reach out, to close the gap between them, but she was terrified of what it would mean. "We can't do this," she whispered, even as every fiber of her being screamed at her to take the leap. Andrew held her gaze, his eyes soft but determined. "Yes, we can. But only if you're willing to take the risk." Mia swallowed hard, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She had spent her entire life avoiding risks, avoiding anything that could pull her away from her path to success. But as she stood there, looking into Andrew's eyes, she realized that maybe, for the first time, she was willing to take that risk. Without another word, Mia closed the distance between them, her lips meeting his in a kiss that felt both inevitable and terrifying. It wasn't a slow, tentative kiss, it was full of all the pent-up emotions they had both been suppressing, a collision of desire and fear, passion and uncertainty. When they finally pulled apart, Mia's heart was pounding in her chest, her mind spinning. She had crossed a line she had sworn she never would, and now there was no going back. But as she looked at Andrew, who was watching her with the same intensity she felt coursing through her veins, she realized that maybe, just maybe, this was a line she had needed to cross. Part 6: A New Reality. The days that followed were a blur. Mia and Andrew continued to fight tooth and nail in the courtroom, but outside of work, everything had changed. Their relationship, once simmering beneath the surface, was now out in the open, at least between the two of them. They kept things professional in front of their colleagues and clients, but in private, they allowed themselves to be vulnerable with each other in a way that Mia had never experienced before. It was exhilarating, but it was also terrifying. Mia had always prided herself on her ability to keep her personal and professional lives separate, but now the lines were blurring, and she didn't know how to handle it. She found herself questioning her decisions more than ever before. Was she letting her feelings for Andrew cloud her judgment in the case? Was she still giving it her all, or was she holding back because she didn't want to hurt him? The case was coming to a head, and the pressure was mounting. Both Mia and Andrew knew that a verdict was imminent, and with it, the potential to change everything. Neither of them had backed down in court, but their personal relationship had added a layer of complexity that Mia wasn't sure how to navigate. One evening, after another long day in court, Mia sat in her apartment, staring out at the city skyline. She had always loved this view. It had been a source of comfort, a reminder of the life she had built for herself. But tonight, it felt different. Tonight, it felt like the weight of the world was pressing down on her, and she didn't know how to lift it. Her phone buzzed on the table beside her, and she glanced down to see a message from Andrew. "I need to see you. Can I come over?" Mia hesitated for a moment before typing out a reply. "Yes. I'll be here." When Andrew arrived, Mia could see the tension in his face, the same tension she had been feeling for days. He stepped inside, and they stood in silence for a moment, neither of them knowing how to start the conversation they both knew they needed to have. "Mia," Andrew began, his voice quiet but steady. "We need to talk about what happens next." Mia nodded, her chest tightening. "I know." Andrew ran a hand through his hair, looking as conflicted as she felt. "I don't want to lose you. But I also don't want to pretend that this case isn't affecting us. We're both professionals, but it's hard to separate what's happening in court from what's happening between us." Mia looked away, feeling a knot of anxiety in her stomach. She had never been one to let her emotions get in the way of her work, but this was different. This was Andrew. "I don't know how to balance it," she admitted. "I've never been in this situation before." Andrew stepped closer, his expression softening. "Neither have I. But I know one thing. I don't want to go back to pretending like we don't mean something to each other. We can figure this out, but we have to be honest with ourselves. Mia swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words. He was right. They couldn't keep pretending that their relationship wasn't affecting the case. But they also couldn't ignore the fact that they had something real, something worth fighting for. I don't want to lose you either, Mia said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I don't know what to do. Andrew reached out, taking her hands in his. We'll figure it out, Mia. Whatever happens with the case, we'll figure it out together. Mia looked up at him, her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that they could find a way to make this work, both in and out of the courtroom. But there were no guarantees, and that terrified her. Promise me one thing, Mia said, her voice trembling. Promise me that no matter what happens in court, this us doesn't change. Andrew held her gaze, his eyes filled with the same uncertainty and hope she felt. I promise. Part 7, The Verdict. The day of the verdict arrived, and the tension in the courtroom was palpable. Mia sat at her table, her heart racing as she glanced over at Andrew. He was focused, his usual calm demeanor in place, but Mia could see the strain in his expression. The judge entered, and the courtroom fell silent. Mia's stomach twisted into knots as the judge began reading the verdict. As to the claim of breach of contract, the court finds in favor of. Mia held her breath, her mind racing. This was it, the moment that could change everything. The plaintiff. Mia's heart sank. She had won. She should have felt triumphant, but all she felt was a hollow sense of dread. She glanced over at Andrew, who remained still, his expression unreadable. The judge continued with the formalities, but Mia barely heard him. All she could think about was what this verdict meant, not just for the case, but for her and Andrew. When the court finally adjourned, Mia stood, feeling a wave of exhaustion wash over her. She had fought so hard for this win, but now that she had it, it didn't feel like a victory. Andrew approached her, his face a mask of professionalism. Congratulations, Mia. You fought hard. Mia nodded, her throat tight. So did you. For a moment, they stood in silence, the weight of the unspoken hanging between them. Mia wanted to reach out, to say something that would make everything better, but she didn't know what to say. I meant what I said, Andrew said quietly, his voice steady. This doesn't change anything between us. I still want to be with you. Mia's heart ached at his words, but she wasn't sure if she could believe him. How could they move forward after everything that had happened? I don't know if it's that simple, Mia whispered. Andrew took a deep breath, his eyes filled with determination. It never is. But I'm willing to fight for this. For us. Mia looked into his eyes, searching for the answer she wasn't sure she would find. She had spent so long believing that love was a distraction, something that would pull her off course. But now, standing here with Andrew, she realized that maybe, just maybe, love wasn't a distraction at all. Maybe it was the thing that gave her life meaning. I'm willing to fight too, she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. Andrew smiled, a hint of relief in his eyes. Then let's figure it out. Together. Mia nodded, feeling a sense of hope she hadn't felt in a long time. They didn't have all the answers, but they had each other. And for the first time, that felt like enough. Part 8. Navigating the Aftermath. The weeks following the verdict were a delicate balancing act for Mia and Andrew. They had both emerged from the courtroom battered but still standing, and now they were faced with the daunting task of figuring out what came next. The case was over, but the complexities of their personal and professional relationship were just beginning. At first, things were awkward. The aftermath of the case lingered between them like an unspoken shadow, and despite their best efforts to focus on their personal connection, the courtroom victory, and Andrew's loss, remained a source of tension. Mia had worked so hard for that win, but now she couldn't enjoy it. The case had taken something from both of them, and it had left a void that neither of them knew how to fill. They kept seeing each other, trying to recapture the ease they had felt before the verdict, but there was a distance between them now, a chasm they weren't sure how to cross. Mia could see it in Andrew's eyes, the frustration of having lost such an important case. She could sense the pride and ambition that had driven him in the courtroom, the same ambition that had fueled her for so many years. One evening, as they sat together on Mia's balcony, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, the tension finally broke. "I don't know how to do this, Mia," Andrew said quietly, his voice laced with frustration. "I don't know how to be with you and still feel like I lost everything." Mia's heart ached at his words, because she understood all too well what he meant. She had built her entire life around winning, and now that she was on the other side of it, she realized just how much it had cost her. This victory didn't feel like a win. It felt like a burden, one she hadn't anticipated. "I don't want this to come between us," Mia said, her voice trembling. "But I don't know how to fix it." Andrew turned to her, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and resolve. "It's not about fixing it. It's about accepting that we're going to have to work through this, both of us. I'm not angry that you won, Mia. I'm just struggling to figure out where that leaves us." Mia nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle over her. She had been so focused on the case, so determined to win, that she hadn't stopped to think about what it would mean for her relationship with Andrew. Now, standing in the wreckage of their professional battle, she realized that winning wasn't everything. Not if it meant losing the person who mattered most. "I don't want to lose you," Mia whispered, her voice barely audible. Andrew's expression softened, and he reached out, taking her hand in his. "You're not going to lose me, Mia. But we need to figure out how to move forward from this. Together." Mia squeezed his hand, a flicker of hope stirring inside her. They had come so far, and they had been through so much. She wasn't ready to give up, not on Andrew, not on them. "I'm willing to try," she said softly, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. Andrew smiled, a small but genuine smile that made Mia feel like maybe, just maybe, they could get through this. "Then we'll figure it out," he said. "One step at a time." Part 9. Rebuilding Trust. As the weeks passed, Mia and Andrew slowly began to rebuild their relationship. It wasn't easy. There were moments of frustration, moments when the weight of the case still lingered between them like a shadow, but they were both committed to making it work. They had fought too hard to walk away now. They started small, the simple dinners, quiet evenings together, walks through the park where they could talk about everything but the case. It was a slow process, one that required patience and understanding, but Mia began to realize that love, like the law, wasn't always about winning. Sometimes, it was about compromise. About meeting each other halfway, even when it felt impossible. For Mia, this was a new lesson. She had spent so much of her life believing that strength meant never bending, never showing weakness. But with Andrew, she was learning that vulnerability wasn't a weakness, it was a strength. It was the foundation upon which real, lasting relationships were built. One evening, as they sat together in Andrew's apartment, Mia felt the tension that had been hanging over them for so long finally begin to lift. They were sitting on the couch, talking about nothing in particular, work, movies, plans for the weekend, when Andrew suddenly turned to her, his expression serious. "Mia, I've been thinking," he said slowly. "I know we've both been trying to figure out how to move past the case, but I think we need to stop seeing it as something we need to get over. It's part of our story, and it's going to shape how we move forward." Mia nodded, understanding what he meant. They couldn't erase what had happened in the courtroom, couldn't pretend that it hadn't affected them. But they could choose how they let it shape their future. "I agree," Mia said softly. "It's part of who we are. But that doesn't mean it has to define us." Andrew smiled, relief evident in his eyes. "Exactly. We can build something new, something that's just ours, outside of the courtroom. But we have to let go of the idea that winning or losing is what matters." Mia felt a sense of peace settle over her, the kind of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. She had spent so much of her life chasing success, believing that it was the only thing that mattered. But now, sitting here with Andrew, she realized that there was more to life than winning cases. There was love. There was connection. There was the possibility of building a future with someone who truly understood her. "I'm ready to do that," Mia said, her voice steady. "I'm ready to build something new with you." Andrew's smile widened, and he leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to her lips. "Then let's do it. Let's take it one step at a time." And for the first time, Mia felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. Part 10, A New Beginning. Months passed, and Mia and Andrew's relationship continued to grow stronger. They had found a new rhythm, one that allowed them to support each other both in and out of the courtroom. There were still challenges, of course, moments of tension, moments when their competitive natures clashed, but they had learned how to navigate those moments with grace and understanding. Their careers continued to thrive, but now, instead of seeing each other as rivals, they saw each other as partners. They weren't afraid to challenge each other, to push each other to be better, but they had also learned the importance of compromise and collaboration. For Mia, this was a revelation. She had always believed that love was a distraction, something that would pull her away from her goals. But now she realized that love, true love, was the opposite. It wasn't a distraction, it was a source of strength. It gave her the courage to take risks, to push herself further, to believe that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. One evening, as Mia and Andrew sat together on her balcony, watching the sunset, Mia felt a sense of contentment wash over her. The city stretched out before them, a symbol of the life they had built, both individually and together. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And that was enough. Andrew turned to her, his expression soft and thoughtful. "I've been thinking," he said quietly. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Mia smiled, her heart swelling with love for him. "We have." Andrew reached for her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. "I know we've been taking things one step at a time, but I want you to know that I'm all in, Mia. I want to build a future with you. No matter what happens, no matter what challenges come our way, I'm not going anywhere." Mia felt a lump form in her throat, her heart pounding in her chest. She had spent so long believing that she didn't need anyone, that love was something she could live without. But now, looking at Andrew, she realized just how wrong she had been. "I'm all in too," Mia said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I want to build a future with you too." Andrew smiled, pulling her closer. "Then let's do it. One step at a time." Mia leaned into him, feeling a sense of peace she had never known before. They had been through so much, professionally, personally, and yet here they were, stronger than ever. It wasn't always easy, but it was worth it. Every challenge, every moment of doubt, had led them to this point. And as they sat there, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, Mia knew that this was just the beginning of their story. A story built on trust, love, and the understanding that sometimes, the greatest victories weren't the ones you won in the courtroom, they were the ones you won in your heart. The end. This concludes the full story of The Unspoken Contract. Mia and Andrew's journey from rivals to partners, both in love and in life, highlights the complexities of balancing professional ambition with personal connection. Through their struggles and triumphs, they built something real and lasting, one step at a time.